When I first discovered my personality type when I was 28 years old, I'm 40 now, it completely reframed my understanding of who I was and my purpose, my direction, and why I stumbled over some of the things that I stumbled over again and again and again in my life. Today, I'm bringing Dr. Dario Nardi on to talk about personality type and how that relates to characters, self-development, stories, writing, and also why the most powerful stories aren't fiction. They're the ones that we live every day, and how we can bring that information into our lives in order to be happier and more positive, more fulfilled. So thank you
Yeah.
for coming on, Dr. Dario Nardi.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And this is certainly role-playing games in Japan and a few other topics, something that we have in common. So it's very exciting to dive into this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it started. I was, of course, interested in personality type, and then I saw that you had created a tabletop role-playing game, and
Mhm.
you had lived in Japan, and I was just like, okay, I need to write this man and figure out what is going on. So thank you again for joining.
Yeah.
And is there anything that people who may be unfamiliar with you or your work should know before we go into talking about one of your many books and
And
personality type and self-discovery?
uh, yeah, I don't know. I've been writing short stories for a long time, and sometimes they were good, and sometimes they were mediocre. And I just felt really inspired. Recently, like a year and a half, 2 years ago, to just really dive in and do stories again. And I actually do have another anthology, which is all fantasy, um, like Renaissance, 16th, 18th, 19th century fantasy. And somebody pointed something out to me, which I didn't realize in putting them all together, that every story was about love in some way.
Interesting.
And I thought that was really cool, and I didn't intend that, but, I would hope that that was true also about type, even though type and love don't seem to intersect that often unless it's the question, "Which type am I best matched with?" or something, which is sort of like a clinical kind of question compared to,
Hmm.
just love in all
Yeah.
of its, hideous and horrible and wonderful and joyful forms.
Mm. I get that question a lot about, well, which type should I seek and which am I going to have the best compatibility with? So, yeah, we have, I'm sure, lots of different opinions on it. Um, I, what was I going to say? Well, in relation to love, just in
Mhm.
general, knowing personality type and specifically the cognitive functions has helped me have more self-love and self-appreciation for my struggles and my strengths. And I've been able to use that to relate better to other people as well, because I can see why they're going through what they're going through and some of their thought process and why they perceive the world in a certain way, because I've done the work to understand it within myself as well, using
Mhm.
personality type as the key tool for that.
Mhm.
So it's been very helpful in that sense.
Yeah, I would say that type is a sort of constant reference point or point of departure, and as I've gotten older, to recognize and have a way to talk about, like, what's happening, because I find fundamentally that the type that, its magic is about development, not about static type descriptions,
Mm,
and that it creates this picture or compass for development for every type.
mhm,
Not that we all develop in the same ways as everybody else in our type, but it's like, well, what's going on with me? Like, what is this? It's our third function, fourth function, eighth function, like whatever it is. And that allows us to then make sense of what's going on, and then maybe be able to step back from it and see a little bit more clearly.
mhm. Yeah, they're kind of like little themes that will keep popping up throughout our lives. And I think certain personality types focus on certain themes more often. It might be like analysis or strategy or vision or innovation,
Mm,
resonance, unification,
mhm,
stability or engagement, with
mhm,
the sensory world. And yes, we can go into all those different domains, different aspects, different themes throughout our lives. But we tend to gravitate towards certain ones more than
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
Um, so why are we talking about personality type and character creation or writing stories? Like, what is the
Yeah.
overlap in your mind
Mm.
between those two, and why is it helpful for
Well,
us?
well, how can I say? So a lot of type dialogue in forums and in books and so on is theory and maybe some like personal stories or case studies or whatever it is. Um, and and I believe, and I've said, the type's specialness is that it is really, if we want to talk about type, we need to talk about development. And
Mhm.
when we talk about development, we either can talk about it in a very introverted thinking way, which is like, oh, here's the theory and the framework, and we're going to try and precisely label how development happens, and this is what's typical for each type. And it's becomes, this very abstract kind of thing, which can be really powerful, but leaves the
Mhm.
reader maybe empty in terms of how to connect it. It's also hard for people to learn. For people who get into type, I hate to tell you, but like the function stack stuff is not quickly learned by most people.
No. Mhm.
No, like even just the idea of 8 functions is like, wait, trying to keep them all straight. Narrative, however, stories are something that we're hardwired to understand and remember.
Mhm.
Like when we're kids, we remember stories. So and I think the stories are somehow more interesting than case studies. Jane worked at such and such company and this happened. I mean, those are fine. Um, but this idea of story is something compelling that,
Mhm.
and I feel like case studies need to be sanitized often. And,
Yeah.
and, I'm not going to be like inappropriate in the stories, but I also want to go to places that maybe would be difficult. And
Mhm.
because that's what like our lives are about, is the things that are the times that are difficult, um and maybe a little bit weird, or what Jung described as these numinous spaces that we pass through
Mhm.
where like we're completely surprised and something doesn't make sense, and how did we end up here, and it's very gray and choppy waters, and then we move out of that, and type, it's a great way to show type development.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that uh, a lot of times we get into different obstacles and situations because we're trying to apply our personality type to a situation that might not be the most effective or efficient. But
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna, it's my core skills and tool set. So I'm going to try to use that and apply that to everything. But then it doesn't quite work. And then we get ourselves into this obstacle or this situation, and we have to either pull on our weaknesses or different aspects
Mhm.
of our personality type that we haven't focused on, or kind of go around and like, well, how can I still find a way to apply my core strengths of my personality type in order to get me out of this jam?
Mhm.
And I think it takes a lot of like uh, trial and error, creative thinking, or again, pulling on different aspects of our personality type.
Mhm. Mhm.
I know that's pretty
And then
vague, but
yeah, no. I think some way to make it sort of concrete and to highlight something is that, I think when development happens, it always happens with other people or with respect to other people. So there is occasionally that story that's like, the human being against nature, or but then it's nature personified, or the alien, or whatever it is. But
Mhm.
the alien is our shadow self. But for the most part, it's in relation to other people, and is when it happens. And there's sort of maybe the stereotype that, oh, like people with extroverted feelings, so the FJ types or whatever, like they're so good at relationships and this and that. No, I know lots of miserable FJs, and there
Yeah.
there are miserable and happy people of every type, um, and a lot of it is because our talents, especially is the way Myers Briggs describes them and sort of the standard descriptions, those are really well suited for, like, public life, in the sense
Yeah.
of, like, "Oh, I'm in a company and, like, I'm dealing with customers." You're not marrying your customer. It's and when you don't have to live with your customer. But when we get close to somebody, as Jung described, he's like, whenever some kind of something interesting is going on that's actually meaningful, chemistry or reaction is going to happen. And that
Mm.
those two reactants are going to, even if they bounce off of each other and never come back again, will be changed permanently by it.
Mhm.
So I think that that's in every one of the stories, the type stories I've worked on, there's always some other person.
Mm.
And that's just a reminder, it's like a base, some of the basic concepts about development, which is why it's sort of funny. Oh, self-help and self-development. I'm going to sit in a room by myself and I'm going to meditate. And yeah, it might help as a resource practice, but like, as they say, no matter how enlightened you are, go back and live with your family for 3 days and see how that works. Yeah. Machuto tahen, ne?
Yeah. Um, so you mentioned briefly a little bit more about your book. I'm wondering
Mhm.
if we can talk about, um, I guess, just an overview of what it is, and then
Mhm.
maybe your approach to writing some of the characters' stories, and we can
Cool.
compare and contrast that with another personality type if that works for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. Um,
And
so
feel
how
free
so
to.
it's teaching tales
Mhm.
or the 16 personality types. So this idea of why is it called teaching tales? That phrase, that idea comes from Milton Erickson, who was like the father of in 20th century hypnosis. And he
Mhm.
used metaphorical, therapeutic metaphor and storytelling as a way to reach people. Because the idea was is that people were repeating these stories and living out these stories, and they go in circles and they're unfulfilling. And so let's
Mhm.
start the person in a familiar place. So we're going to open the story in a very familiar place for them. And then we're going to take that in that story and lead them in a new direction. So I
Mhm.
wanted, again, if type is about development, to give people examples of type development. So they're not actually examples of the types, because that would be boring. I mean, there is a chapter at the beginning that's pretty solidly just examples of 4 types, because people said, no, we need something very clear
Mhm.
to start off with. But they're really examples of development. And so the very first story I wrote was INFP, actually. And there's only 2
Interesting.
genre stories in the whole book out of like 39, 40 stories, and that's one of them. And so it's a medieval prince, and he's young and he's in a position in a castle which is very comfortable, and he gets to do whatever he wants, and he has his friends. Um, and it's going to be time when either his older brother is going to become king, and his older brother is, as we read sort of between the lines, probably a very different type, ESTJ or ESTP, something like that. And so is this INFP character prince willing to step up and like actually be a hero? And in order to do that, he's going to need to find his opposite type in that process
Mhm.
and encounter that. Um, and then the other one and I wrote at least 2 stories of every type, one male character, one female character, and also just like the flavor of them is much different. So the other
Mhm.
INFP story just follows this like late middle aged woman as her daughter tries to convince her to go on some dates. And and that may sound somewhat pedestrian, but actually I think is that I like the story a lot. Um,
Mhm. No, I
personally, and
liked
that
it.
was pretty much later, but it's they where she's already gotten comfortable with her opposite in a way. Like she's very comfortable in her introverted sensing and introverted feeling, and there's this attitude like, no, why my life is fine, I'm satisfied.
Mhm.
And there's a certain even level of, I want to say, like the FI is honed enough that there's a cynicism about like what's actually possible, or realism about what's actually possible in romance. Um,
Wow.
I'm not going to say I'm not a believer in happy endings for every story, but all of these have type development that happens, and that is a happy ending.
Mhm.
And that's certainly a good thing. And then the themes that come up across the stories, all of them. And to be honest, one thing I did is not just me looking at the stories, but after I wrote most of them, I fed them all into AI and asked it to identify, like, what themes do you see, as well as
Mm.
giving it to real people, to two different groups of people to evaluate. Um, and so there were themes that jumped out, and then that really inspired me to, like, really dig into that direction of not just type themes, but development themes.
Mm.
And that's and the development themes are very different. Like, they're like INFP and INFJ have very different developmental themes.
Mhm. Is that something you want to double click on, and we can talk a little bit more
Sure.
about? I don't know
Yeah.
how in depth you want to go with all of those.
No, no,
If
no.
we want
We
to
we
just
don't
stick
need to
with
go that
like,
in depth. So
mm,
after in in each section, so I sort of group them. So the STJs and the NFPs are all together in one section because they're all developing in the direction of each other. Like INFP slowly but surely is hopefully developing in the direction of ESTJ,
uh,
and vice versa. And something I noticed, like, after the stories were written, and I had multiple inspirations of real people I knew, and never no story is based on one person alone. But that's the
mhm,
benefit of doing type for 30 years. I just have lots of examples in my head,
yeah,
which helps a lot. But both ESTJ and INFP, I'm just reading here, often feel called to take up a cause for the good of their larger community. That could be an online community, it could be their local community, their family, like however they
yeah,
want to define it. They are incredibly steadfast despite obstacles, especially those presented by other people. Part of the obstacle or motivation is others' bad, unethical, immoral, or illegal behavior.
mhm.
So that
I
tends
can
to
see
be
that one.
particularly motivating. Yes, I think for INFPs, it tends to be more, is it unethical or immoral, or just bad intentions. For ESTJ, more as like, is it illegal? Is it, yeah, actually they're concerned about morality too. And
Yeah.
then at a specific point, the ESTJ or INFP can doubt their capability and they consider stopping and sort of running away from it. Um, and overall, they strive to right a wrong and establish a more just order.
Mhm.
And that's something that we see in all four of those stories. Um, and that's just an example. That isn't the only thing that this is based on. I'm just like pulling out one thing here because each section has like a few pages of analysis and reflection. Um, and that's an
Mhm.
example. Whereas you want me to do, like, INFJ as a comparison?
Sure. I'm just wondering if there's anything that I should talk about my own personal experience as an
Oh,
INFP
yeah.
with ESTJ best friend and
Mm.
mother-in-law.
Yeah.
I definitely like taking up a cause for the good of the larger community. Um, I think also when you read it, what at a specific point they can doubt their capability and consider stopping.
Uh-huh.
I think just in my mind, a lot of INFPs have this massive, like, huge goal to impact humanity in a way
Uh-huh.
that's, you know, something that's going to change the world and help so many people. But then we get overwhelmed with the
Uh-huh.
steps to implement it, or it just feels like, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't make a change. Like, no matter how hard I try, I'm still in this world, in this
Yeah.
ESTJ world that I can't make any impact on. I've definitely seen that comment a bunch in my videos as well. Um, and I think we often consider stopping, or we stop ourselves just before we get to that point of actually making the big impact. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to uh, let other INFPs who might be watching this know that you're there. You're almost there. Just got to
Yeah.
go a little bit further.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder what would be the thing that would make an ESTJ consider stopping at that point. Like,
So the example in the ESTJ story is, a woman whose children are in school, and she's very focused on the kids doing well and so on. And she comes to realize that the school is doing something not just that she doesn't approve of, but is actually illegal.
mm,
Um, And so she becomes involved in rallying parents and the community and decides ultimately to run for the school board to have an impact that way. And then, of course, she realizes that this is going to generate a backlash, as often happens today.
Mhm.
I forget what the term is, but this whole idea of people coming to her home and terrorizing her family in a sense.
Mm.
Especially her. I mean, we find that eventually it's her opponent who is behind doing this. Um, but then she really considers stopping because she's like, "This is terrible for my family. Like, I'm
Okay.
actually creating a worse situation than we started off with." And is it really worth it to go through all of this mud,
Mhm.
and suffering, and is this appropriate? And she can see that, yeah, I mean, is just like, is she signed up for a role that's bigger than what she's ready for.
Mhm. Okay. And the impact that it would have on her or her family was
Yeah.
something that she had to consider, as opposed to, likely, in my perspective of an INFP, it's like I can't make a dent in the world. Like I don't have the tools or
Yeah.
knowledge to do
Yeah.
it. Like it seems like a TE thing that I would be struggling with, or a
Yeah,
SITE
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, and it's not, I mean, at no point does she actually doubt her own ability to make an impact. It's
That's what I
simply
was
what
thinking.
is
Yeah.
the cost that's willing to be paid, not just on her, but actually mostly on her family, and, like, is this a responsible thing for her to do?
Hmm.
And that's, yeah, and then the other ESTJ story is a coach who's like a basketball coach who's fairly well revered and the players love him and all of that and the parents. And something happens to him, and he ends up in the hospital. And through a lot of the story, it's his ability to push himself to recover, to go through
Mm.
that terrible rehab process. Um, and that isn't the main thing because he is capable of doing that. Again, he has
Mm.
TE to sort of push through it. But is he really like willing and able to, like, express his emotions?
Mm.
And how does that feeling for what's of value to him, is always gonna wanna minimize anything emotional and push it away or make a joke of it or whatever it is,
Compartmentalize. Yeah.
compartmentalize, and is he willing to do a little bit more than that? And that's, yeah, and that's and it is meant to be a somewhat touching story, and I think between the two of them, we see two different ESTJs.
Mm.
In similar but different, and the same with the INFPs.
Good. Cool. Yeah. I could continue talking about it forever, but maybe we should move on to some of the other quadrants. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll just say a little bit about INFJ, which is in a very different part of the book because it's matched up with NFJs and STPs. Um, and again, there's a number of paragraphs, but I'm only going to read one thing that's in the analysis for INFJ, and it's what they have in common with their opposite ESTP. The INFJ wrestles with the hidden and unpredictable power of the unconscious. Despite thinking they've got a viewpoint figured out, they encounter social stress in a social situation that breaks their logic and spirals out of control. Over time, hidden inner tensions slowly undermine their way of living, and they are called to incorporate an awakening into their lives as part of further helping other people. And
Okay.
that doesn't really sound like INFP to me.
No,
Yeah.
no,
No, that's a very, very different, right. Wrestling with the hidden
completely.
and unpredictable power of the unconscious. Um, and this
I
whole
was I was
idea.
just trying to take in the whole paradigm. Like
Yeah, yeah, no, I know
that's
it's
not
very
me.
dense. Yes, that's why we have stories,
Mhm.
because the theory part can be very dense, and then the story is what really highlights it in action. And one of the INFJ stories is a university professor, and how at first she encourages and inspired by some of her students taking social action on campus, and then eventually she becomes the target of their social action when she tries to take a more balanced approach. And then this
Okay.
causes her a lot of stress and really wondering, like, oh my God, what have I done wrong?
Uh-huh.
And trying to find this sort of, like, she needs to have both to de-stress, and she ends up going like off by herself.
Mm.
And is able to get an insight and then come back and find a more diplomatic solution.
Mhm.
The words that are needed in order to smooth over the situation and to advance it.
Mhm.
Um, and that's and then the other INFJ story, I won't go into the plot, but it ends up having a lot of archetypal elements when one digs into it. That is very much like king, warrior, magician, lover kind of
Mhm.
thing, without that being hit in the face with it. And I felt that gets at a different aspect of introverted intuiting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a really hard story to INFJ is a really hard type to write. Like it's
Really? Why is that?
yeah, I think 'cause some of it's close to my type, and when I first wrote that second story, it was just too much introverted intuiting, and it's like, where is the TI and FE?
Okay.
Um, yeah, it just is stuff like that, and really, like, it conveying the depth and complexity of the type, while it's still being a short story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. 'Cause I feel with INFP there's very much like the world reflected in a drop of rain, a drop of water, and that you can tell an INFP story. You may know like the very famous Japanese author is like The Artist in the Floating World. It
Mhm.
translated into English, and it's just a very like abstract, go with the flow, like moments of life kind of novel. And in every moment, like there's a reflection of the whole world and the character. With INFJ, you gotta like have all the elements lined up and in place. And if something
Oh,
is off, then the INFJ reader is like, I don't understand what's going on. These are not fitting because their introverted thinking is like everything needs to make sense
yeah.
and fit the puzzle pieces need to fit together.
Uh-huh. I guess that's one of the biggest benefits of having other readers go through your
Yes.
book and check to make sure that it makes sense to them with their personality type. So
Yes.
very,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the ESTP, one of their stories and how that is reflected or
Sure.
mirrored?
I have two ESTPs, and I'll just talk about one of them, which I really had fun with. So this is sort of like your standard, like late 20 something successful corporate salesman ESTP, who has a sort of magic way of getting clients, and
Mhm.
securing good deals. And he happens one evening to go to a hypnosis, like magician performance show with some friends. And he does and he's not really a believer in hypnosis, but the whole thing is very entertaining for him.
Okay.
And then he realizes later through the other people that went with him that actually he had volunteered to go on stage and was hypnotized and did stuff, and he didn't remember that he did this,
Uh-huh.
and he's now really and there's even a picture of it, so now he's very embarrassed by it. And not only that,
Okay.
but all of his mojo at work, in sales and so on, like, stops working.
Okay.
And he's like, what, like, he
Yeah.
just feels like real like screwed basically. Like, where am I gonna go from here?
Mhm.
Um, and he had a number of those sort of negative qualities that we can associate with an immature ESTP, and so he has
Mhm.
to come and face some of those things. And finally, he decides to actually attend a workshop, like an NLP kind of workshop, where you learn about hypnosis. And that's where he
Mhm.
starts on like a new journey in life that he's like, oh, I can actually be in a profession that helps people as
Uh-huh.
opposed to just selling stuff to them.
Yeah.
And so there's a nice sort of reframe that happens. And then he also manages to meet someone there and because he had, very like superficial relationships before. And then this is something that's actually deeper.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. I love it. Like anytime that you talk about one of the characters of the story, I can immediately think of somebody in my life
Yeah.
that has gone through that. Or like, oh yeah, that person was probably an ESTP or ESTJ, and it just didn't even like I didn't even consider it before. But
Mm,
when you start connecting it to their life and the story and the events that happen, it definitely brings a lot of information to the surface. I believe
mm,
that I'm able to just say, "Oh, yep, yep, I can see those connections right there."
So
So I think
something
that's
that
very
did
helpful too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and something that was particularly helpful to me getting feedback from people was, noticing that for the SJ and NP types, that many times it's an accumulation of many small things that lead to a change. And that for the NJ and SP types, there's often a lot of resistance and inertia until one giant thing happens.
Uh-huh.
And then they're just like thrown into the deep end and have to make sense of it. And I found it amusing sometimes that people would say, no, I mean, they liked the story for like their own type and many times even their opposite type. But then they get to some like completely different type. And their
Uh-huh.
comment is like, oh, this character is really weird. Like I remember the second ENFJ story that I wrote, and I remember the actually ENTP in the writing group was like, "Oh, this character is like really weird. Like, are people actually like this?" And I'm like, "Yes, like go on YouTube. Like you will find there are psychic channelers. Like this is a
Uh-huh.
thing."
Uh-huh.
Yes. And so it was because half of the types, 8 out of 16 have introverted intuiting as one of their like, top 4, either their
Mhm.
preference or their opposite. So invariably it's going to be part of it. And NI is often it's not haha funny or amusing like NE, it's like weird funny. And that's but for the people who are like the ENFJ who read it is like, "Oh no, this like makes complete sense. Like I
Mhm.
identify with this character a lot."
Mhm. Yeah, I was reminded of when I was talking to an ENFJ friend of mine about my business and marketing and personality type, and like I was hinting at, or I think I was explicitly saying, like a lot of people say like they feel broken, and personality
Right.
type was helpful for us to understand that, and I've said that like this me
Right.
as well as other people that have commented, and he was like, really, do other people actually feel that way or say that? And that was just one of those moments of, again, reinforcing the fact that different personality types and different people see the world differently. And just it was, I don't know, mind
Yes.
expanding, even though it was just a simple comment. So I imagine that having all these stories in a way that
And
people can read through them and say, as you mentioned, like that's weird or that's different. Do people actually do that? Like,
Right?
why is this a story? But then having those conversations with that other personality type, say, oh yeah, this is perfect. It makes complete sense. Like this is exactly
Yeah.
what I would do in that situation. And this, I've actually been through a similar situation and I learned XYZ. Like having all those conversations be able to
Mhm.
come about through story as a platform or as
Yeah.
a medium,
Mhm.
I think can open up a lot of doors to understanding.
Yeah.
Especially as you mentioned before, like it's nice to have clear definitions and
Mhm.
explanations, but once it comes down to actually
Yes.
applying it, quite different.
I will have to stop for a moment. Yeah, I'm
Yep.
sorry, I'm in the middle of recording. Yeah. Um, I don't know if we
Cool.
can cut that out, but
Yeah, we can. And how are you feeling so far about the
oh, no, no,
conversation since
I'm
we're
good. It's great. I lost a little bit of my train of thought with that, and I wasn't
you
fully
tend to
listening at the end because I kept hearing this knocking on the door. Yeah.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
There was nothing necessarily for you to follow up about that, but it was
Okay.
just again, it was hammering home why
Oh, I know what I
stories
was
are
gonna say.
important.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So let's see, 3, 2, 1. Um, that makes me think too about sort of like stereotype busting. That in the ESFP stories, for example, the one of the ESFPs actually starts on a writing project that's like a science fiction story. And you
Mhm.
wouldn't think from her background and this and that, like, where is this coming from? But in the story, it makes complete sense how introverted intuiting sort of rises up and how it connects in the character story. And it is actually based off of an actual ESFP that I know who was inspired to do this. So it's like, no, no,
Mhm.
no, people are much more, uh, there's a lot more depth than we might think, and to get past those stereotypes.
Mhm. Yeah, and having a story as an example of that it's extremely helpful. And it's
Mm.
not just one story, it's not just one character, but you have two for each of the personality
Mhm.
types at
Mhm.
least, right?
Yeah, yeah. In a
So
few cases, so towards the end of the book, I have like a bonus section that has several characters. Because like all of these, they face issues, but they're like basically good people and they grow. And but I wanted to showcase three characters who they aren't necessarily bad people or something, but they're either in like trapped inside of a really bad system, like the case of
mm,
the ESTJ, the INTP in that sort of like bonus section, who is like has a really bad model,
mm,
and then there's an ENFJ who also has like I want to say like a toxic attitude about her vision, and so
mm,
each something comes up that like shakes them out of that and makes them see like, oh, the system I'm in is actually really bad,
mm,
or the model that I have is like, wow, that's really not a good model. um and that's something I just wanted to not like harp on that, but to give some examples that it's not always there's, and we talked about a little bit just going into this, like I don't want to call them um bad guys, but they would be characters who would definitely be compromised, I think is the word.
mm,
And then how do we grow out of being compromised?
mm. That's good. I think there would be a lot of benefit also for people to read a whole set of those stories of, why, like what happened to this INFP to make them uh,
Mm.
this kind of person, and how could we avoid that, or what steps might you take if you were in that type of situation. Um, but that's
Mm.
it could be a whole nother
Yeah,
book or
yeah,
topic.
that's for another. Well, actually, so that reminds me, we can actually explore that because you have developed a tool on the web
Yeah.
for creating stories. I think it's sort of neat that I did the sort of INFP thing. I'm like, oh, I'm going to write an anthology of short stories, and then you did the INTJ thing of like, let me write a computer program, basically. I mean, this is in case
Yeah.
using AI that actually writes
Mhm.
the stories for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us about that. I really was excited about it. I'm like, oh my god, look at what Matt created. Like this is awesome.
Sure. I do want to maybe close this loop on, do we
Mm,
need to talk about the other quadrants?
no, I don't
Or are
think
we
so.
okay?
I think we're okay. Yeah.
All right. I didn't know if there's anything you wanted to say
Mhm.
about it or anything like that. So this is right now it's called Typecaster. It's an MBTI Myers-Briggs based. Actually, it's based off the cognitive functions um, way of writing stories, and it's got all the different personality types here. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this was, of course, because I was inspired by what you did, and
Mm.
also having been working on a tabletop role playing game for quite a while and doing, uh, role playing games through different personality types. I've noticed a lot of benefit from
Mm.
reading other type stories, from playing as like an ENTJ, for example, and noticing what comes up in me as I'm playing that character, some of my clashes with the personality type or different aspects within myself.
Mhm.
And so I thought, it might be fun to have a way to generate an infinite amount of stories based off the personality types. So just running people through this, right now it's still a bit buggy, but that's okay.
Almost.
There's a learn section at the top, so you can go in there and learn more about the frameworks. And then you can
Almost.
choose your personality type. Is there one one that you want to talk
I
about?
don't know. On the one hand, oh well, if it's INFPs, why we could do ESTJ.
So when you click on the personality type, it expands it a little bit and talks about some of, well, the cognitive functions with my naming convention for it as different parts,
No.
different characters within the fellowship of your mind, and how they might appear in your story. So some of the aspects, um, the themes that might be within the story might be relevant to the personality type. Of course, you can highlight specific things. You can, give a backstory and all those things.
Mhm.
Maybe we can go through both at the same time. So you talking about like how you came up with the direction for your story, based off the personality type. And
Right,
then,
right.
like, so we can get your model, your
Mm,
framework for
mm, mm,
understanding,
mm,
like,
mm.
why did you go in this direction for your character?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, some of it was very organic that I thought of people that were clear examples of their type. The other is that I sort of have a snapshot for every type that's the common themes for that type. And
mhm,
so what a little bit like what you have here, what are the common themes? And if I go and look at, say, uh actually, the Catch the Monkey, the ISTJ story, that one was inspired by a news article that maybe wasn't an ISTJ, but I thought was just like a really funny article that an
mm,
ISTJ would enjoy reading about. But sort of like, what are the core themes of INFP? Um, and by core themes, I don't mean the function stack. I mean
mhm,
something much more organic. So they need a quest or core meaning, yet they tend to go with the flow. They have a talent to listen in order to help, noticing what sits behind what's said. They explore moral questions. They enjoy uncovering mysteries. INFPs relate through stories and metaphors, and they have a way of knowing what is believable. They seek to balance opposites. To
mm,
get to really know oneself again is a beautiful moment. They can manage others pretty well. I think that's a secret, by the way. INFPs can actually manage other people fairly well. They
mhm.
struggle with structure and getting their lives in order. Like, those are just broad, organic statements about the INFP tree. And
Uh-huh.
then having that function stack that's there, and where they lead with their sort of heroic self, where they struggle, what they aspire to, keeping in mind the function stack. And those are the main three things: the themes, like the actual examples from my life, and then the function stack.
Okay. Yeah. So, like a lot of your own personal information in your database, as well as the organic themes, and
Mm.
then maybe some inspiration from the outer world, whether it's an immediate thing or something that you've uh,
Mhm.
mulled
Yeah,
over
and
before
sometimes
marinated
it
on.
was not a person, it was just like a, news article or something I read that I'm like, "Wow, this would really fit well as a story for such and such type."
You gave me a
Mhm.
couple sheets that
Mm.
were from
Oh,
this
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
book,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so there is additional information. It was actually done afterwards more for, like, role play tips, like, what are typical
Yeah.
behaviors? And actually for a number of years while I was teaching, we had, like, a writing assignment where you would write a story in the first person point of view, so I statements, from your writing partner's point of view, who's a different type and different,
Uh-huh.
meaningfully different function stack, and which is a really really fun process. And it happens in a certain way, so everybody starts off with a similar sort of context. You interview your writing partner, you ask them what they would do. You also get a cheat sheet based on their type or their functions that help you decide in some details. And then you go off and write the story on your own, and then you come back and you and your partner trade stories and like comment on it, and then you make some revisions, and then you share with
Uh-huh.
the class. It's like a whole process. And
Yeah.
I've seen several hundred people go through that. And it's really nice because when you pair some types like ENFP and ISTP,
Uh-huh.
like their functions are so completely different from each other that it really is a stretch. Um,
Yeah.
and I have found in general that extroverts are better at writing stories about other extroverts regardless of type, and introverts are
Mm,
better at writing stories about other introverts regardless of type.
I can see that.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost like introverts can see each other's introverted function, even though
Mm,
it's not on the outside.
interesting. I I bet that was an extremely beneficial exercise, creative writing through or about the other personality
Mhm.
type from their perspective. Um,
Yeah,
as I mentioned,
yeah.
like with role playing, and I know you've done it too, with different personality types. It can be quite difficult sometimes, especially spur of the moment to act in that character.
Mhm.
But having personality type as a uh, a way of understanding what the character might do, might think, why
Mhm.
they might approach it in this way.
Mm.
gives so much more depth and life to the character.
So, coming to think of it, going way, way back in time, when I was first learning about type, and I happened to be, I was a student volunteer at NLP and Ericksonian Methods, like World Conference in Los Angeles or something. And
Okay.
something that came out of that when learning about like rapport building and listening for the language that people use was I spent a lot of time thinking about the people that I met and knew, and just like brainstorming what are the words that they typically use that are like their favorite keywords that they respond to, which is really
Mhm.
helpful in doing something like dialogue.
Yeah.
The words that an INFP is going to select and sound authentic are going to be very different than what an ESTP selects to say.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, this is why, for example, I think especially a type like INFP, and if they're politically liberal and they listen to Donald Trump, they're like, "Oh my God, this sounds horrendous." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you would never even talk that way, because you
Yeah.
don't use those words in that
Hmm.
way. You simply don't. Like
Yeah.
it's like the person is speaking your language, but it's a very foreign way of thinking. And that's a great way to just convey how characters are different by using different language. And
Yeah.
yeah, in addition to layering on anything else that might be, about the characters like upbringing or anything else about them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something I should include in this program is
No.
keywords or a whole list of different words or phrases for each
Mhm.
personality type. Because I notice that a lot of people comment on my videos like it sounds like you're speaking from my head, like from my brain, because you use the same words that I use and the same mannerisms. And if that's a shortcut to communicating a larger idea, right? Each word is like a,
Mhm.
a capsule container holding
Mhm.
meaning,
Yeah.
then I think that's extremely helpful.
Mhm. And
Uh,
I feel too that
mm,
when we read stories that are about, let's say we're in a relationship with an ENFJ, for example, um, and you read the story that is generated by the AI or from the book that's about an ENFJ, and they're showing these behaviors and using these words that maybe your spouse is using, and you're like, oh, okay, so what she's saying and doing is not personal to me
yeah.
necessarily. Right, this like, "Well, why is she saying and doing this?" Like, this is part of the type, and so it
Hmm.
can build a certain amount of sympathy and understanding.
Yeah. I think that is, again, back to relationships. That's one of the key
Yeah.
love and relationships. I think that's one of the key intentions. It would be nice to have like a chat option so you could chat with the script afterwards
Yeah.
um, to get a deeper understanding of the character. But
Oh, yeah, no,
so
that would be brilliant.
someday.
Mm.
So you said ESTJ? I'm gonna do
Yeah,
ESTJ.
yeah, and then we go down
Okay.
to the worlds and setting, and,
I'll turn on advanced mode. Is there a plot archetype that you want to go with?
I
Is there
think
one that
love
like comes to mind
triangles
for
for
ESTJ?
ESTJ would be great because there's a stereotype that ESTJs just like select someone and then like that's either works or it doesn't, and it's very businesslike. But ESTJs have been in a love triangle too, I'm sure.
I'm sure they have.
Yeah,
I not based off
and
personal experience.
yeah.
Okay.
Let's give the AI a run for its money. Um,
Yeah.
SJs love mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that would be um
So
cozy
I don't
neutral.
know if all of these are going to specifically work. They might. I told it what to do. But
Mm.
crime caper, I could see my ESTJ friend getting into that.
Yeah, yeah. Either
Um,
or that or true crime fictionalized. Because
true.
nothing excites an SJ than reading about a true crime and how it
And a
was
love
solved.
triangle.
Yeah, and with a love
Okay.
triangle. Yes. Yeah.
Low fantasy, high fantasy,
Um,
normal. I don't know.
no, like, yeah, normal to even like slightly low. I think it
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
need to be I mean ESTJ does have extroverted intuiting thirds, so they appreciate quirkiness, but
mhm.
let's not overdo it.
Yeah, or just experimenting it. So I have this setting, auto adjust writing style for the personality type.
Mhm.
Now, is it completely accurate? That's, my intention was to just
Yeah.
have it tweak some things
Mhm.
based off some knowledge that I gave it and some discussion that I had with AI. Um, I think they show up quite differently depending on the personality type, which is what I wanted.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and it depends if you're doing first person as opposed to multiple points of view or
Mhm.
objective. Of course, it's going to be different because the intention's different.
Mhm.
But and you can always tweak these. You could have like a higher level of detail might be appropriate.
Mhm.
Personal disclosures, a little bit less, Um, but yeah, so these are just some of the options that come up with them.
Mhm.
So is there you have a character name or any information you want to put in here? We can just build this out together and see what
Oh, yeah,
happens.
yeah,
We're just
yeah,
gonna have
yeah.
fun with it.
I think some very basic character name like Jake or something is Bill. Like those are like good. Yeah. Um, and age, or you need a last name. I don't know if you need a
I don't
last name.
need like if I don't put in this stuff, it is not very creative yet. It'll just say
Oh,
the
okay.
protagonist.
Yeah, the
And
protagonist. Okay. I think like
I
age
need to have
30
some
is
sort of
nice. Yeah, maybe
okay.
age 30 is typical for your, yeah, occupation. Oh no, it needs to be like, what would it be? I can imagine ESTJ is like, and I'm trying to think of where a mystery would occur. So I'm
Right?
thinking it could be like a murder at like a workplace warehouse or something. And that's,
Okay.
yeah,
I'm just gonna put this in for now.
okay.
Um, I think we'll end up putting it in the chapter guidance section, but
Yeah.
just so I have
Oh,
it.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the funny thing, of course, if folks are wondering, so the first iteration you showed me, and of course, being INTJ, I'm like, oh, and look how you could like make it multiple chapters and this and that, and so I
Yeah,
signed you up for a lot of work to do, um,
a little bit.
a little
That's
bit,
for the
but yeah,
best.
it's really wonderful to have even just 3 chapters because it gives much more of an arc, and
Hmm.
I still feel the AI in general, I don't mean your AI, just AI in general tends to be too general.
Hmm.
And this at least the multiple chapters gives more breathing room.
Asian workplace police
He's a
sergeant.
man, of course, he's like a warehouse manager.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to give him any uh just different
Interests.
interests to flesh out the
Um,
character a bit more?
yeah, I don't know, is he a dog person or a cat person?
A cat person.
Cat person,
At least
okay.
at least the one that I'm thinking of is.
Yeah, okay. Um, and like what other, actually, let's see. He would invariably have something from his opposite type as a hobby. So, well, as long as well as something typical. So, some other hobbies would be financial investments, football, and photography would then be his opposite type.
I don't know if it's gonna just give it too much information or what, but we'll
Yeah,
see. I mean, we're just
we
gonna
we
play
don't
around
know.
with it.
It doesn't always incorporate everything that we say. Yeah.
Okay. So this is also based off your feedback. So we can give your original feedback was like, well, one of them was that it would be nice to have more dialogue. And
Mm.
so in order to do that, I added a chapter focus. So it could be about the events or
Uh,
setting and description, internal reflection, character dialogue. Um, and
mm,
the way that this advanced mode goes is you can choose the focus for each of the
mm-hmm.
chapters.
Oh,
There's
nice.
also
Nice.
the normal mode, which is just it goes through Dan Harmon's story circle, and
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty basic, but it's still fun to read.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also set the time frame. Like, I mean, in my mind, there's be some flashbacks and stuff for the ESTJ. To
I
put you
think
on the
also the
spot, or just like
defaults like action and events make sense for the character. You already selected the viewpoint. The time frame would be in the present, except for maybe some flashbacks to the past. Um, I think that we probably want to mention, if it's a love triangle, who are the two other people. And I'm thinking that will be someone like Lulabelle, who's an ISFP, if that
Is that
helps. It's like Isabel, but Lulabelle. Yeah.
okay?
And then there's got to be another dude who would be and we want to get at the opposite type in some way or something conflicting. If Lulabelle is an ISFP, then I'm just like making this up as I go along. Then I'm thinking that the third person has to be something very different but competing, like ENFJ,
Okay,
and that would be
like the
like
commissioner general or something like that.
yeah. And it could be like somebody. It could be like another manager. It could be like two. There's always complicated when it's a manager and employees.
Mm.
But we'll say that it's Doug, and Doug is aiming to take Jake's job, as well as the girl that he likes.
Is Lulabelle the one that is the victim?
No, it's Doug that's the victim.
Well, I'm curious what's going to happen with all this.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Um, do we want to do some character dialogue for chapter 2
I think so. Yeah.
and just kind of allow it to do what it wants to do? Or should it go in the past? Maybe this is something that happened in the past.
I think so.
Like a
I think
fight
that's a great
between.
idea. The chapter 2 is actually gonna flesh out the big context of what happened in the past.
Do you have anything in mind for that, or do you just want to let it let it do its
I think
thing?
maybe only oh, you know what? Doug and Jake started as friends, and they started working on the same day together at this place. And ultimately, Jake was promoted and Doug was not.
The
And
thing
as
for
for
the
Lulabelle, she has to come into
oh
the
yeah,
picture. Um, and of course, the Lulabelle coming into the picture um, I would say, like, disrupted their friendship.
so she's a coworker, right?
Yeah, she's a coworker. Yes.
Last chapter focus. So I imagine there's thinking about the personality type and the cognitive
Mhm.
functions and like what would be the thing, like is it internal reflection, like going into FI, the
Mhm.
aspirational inferior function, as kind of the ending point for this, or is it something else based off story dynamics? Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Like
I really
balancing those.
think that internal reflection is quite difficult to maintain reader interest.
Mm,
That it's something that sort of happens along the way, or in a much larger work is like one piece in a much larger work. Um,
not one
so
third
I
of the
think it
whole
would,
story. Yeah.
yeah, it could be more like character dialogue that happens between the even like the police investigator and our character. And the investigator has already talked to Lulabelle, but we don't know what she said yet. The classic prisoner's dilemma.
Emotional intensity. And just put
Yeah.
that up to 75 as
Yeah.
well. Let's do.
Mm. Yeah,
All
put
right.
that
You want to
ESTJ
see
in
what
the hot.
happens?
Yeah, let's see what happens.
So the app actually crashed right as I was clicking to create the story, because I did some changes and it wasn't functioning properly. But I ended up copying the same information that we used and I did it again after I fixed the app. And then I sent it to Dario and he did a few edits and then sent it back to me. So I will read it to you now. And this is the second time I'm going through this because I didn't record the audio last time. Beneath the Boxes, crafted by AI with prompts by Matt Sherman and editing by Dario Nardi. May 24th, 2025. Chapter 1, The Missing Link. The warehouse buzzed with the hum of forklifts and the chatter of workers, a symphony of organized chaos that I found oddly comforting. As the manager, I prided myself on the efficiency and structure of our operations. Every box had its place, every employee their role. I thrived in this environment. where everything ran like clockwork. My day had begun, as it always did, with Whiskers winding around my legs, demanding breakfast before I left for work. She was agitated, as usual. "Did you hit the espresso again before I got up?" I remarked to her. As I ate, my mind drifted to the stock market and the latest football stats, tickering along with the morning's news. Investments and sports were my indulgences, second only to my little passion for photography. My apartment's walls were adorned with my captures of urban landscapes, each shot meticulously composed. Hidden in many were all the inside jokes, one's only friends would catch. "You be a good girl, okay?" I encouraged Whiskers, while Daddy's at work. At the warehouse, I moved through my morning routine, ensuring that shipments were scheduled and inventory was as it should be. I traded nods with the busiest workers, Emma, Doug, Sarah, Antonio. My team respected me, and I liked to think it was because they knew I valued their hard work, holding them to the same high standards I set for myself. I was not me, manager, Jake Hammer, for nothing. But today, something was off. During a routine inventory check, I noticed a discrepancy in the stock records. A significant number of high-value electronics were unaccounted for. My first thought was a clerical error, but as I double-checked the numbers, my gut told me it was something more sinister. I couldn't shake the suspicion of foul play. The thought of someone tampering with the system I had worked so hard to perfect stirred a mix of anger and determination within me. We did have safeguards, and I'd implemented an additional one only last month. I decided to review the surveillance footage, hoping it would reveal the truth. As I sat in my office, scrolling through hours of recordings, I couldn't help but think of Doug, our team's most charismatic member. He stood out among the others. He was the kind of person who could light up a room, while also minding rules and details, and some whispered he had ambitions for my job. But I dismissed the thought. We'd known each other since college, before we'd even started here. Doug was loyal, and I never had reason to doubt him. That did not stop me from giving him a pat on the back, hard time, now and then. "Double-check those pallets for me, would you, Doug? Just want everything tight today." The footage was inconclusive, but something about it nagged me. I decided to take a break and gather my thoughts. That's when I ran into Lulabelle, our newest coworker. I'm not one to feed gossip, but Doug clearly had ambitions with her, and I saw why. She was kind, almost gentle, her work steady, and she could sling jokes with the best of them. And she had a knack for seeing what others missed, her creative mind always spinning out funny stories and possibilities. "Jake," she said, her voice soft yet purposeful, "you seem troubled." "Just dealing with some inconsistencies in the inventory," I replied, trying to keep my frustration in check. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "If you need a fresh perspective, I'm here." I nodded, appreciating her offer, but knowing this was something I had to handle myself. Later, as I returned to the footage, a shadow caught my eye. It was a figure, barely visible, lurking near the security cameras during a late-night shift. The same shift Doug had been covering. My heart sank. Could it be him? And how? "We've got systems in place," I muttered. "This shouldn't be possible." I needed to approach this carefully. Accusations could destroy trust, and I value the integrity of my team above all else. But I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. The warehouse was a hive of activity today, and I was acutely aware of the undercurrents of tension. I had to find out the truth, and fast, before the situation spiraled out of control. As the clock's hands circled, I resolved to continue my investigation, determined to protect the order I had worked so hard to maintain. Chapter 2. Unraveling the Mystery. I sat in my small office at the warehouse, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead mixing with the distant clatter of forklifts. The surveillance tapes, searchable video clips from the cloud, lay scattered across my desktop screen, each one a potential key to the puzzle I was determined to solve. The missing electronics nagged at my sense of order like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch, and I needed to figure this out before the next monthly report to the owners in a few days. Otherwise, it was my head on the chopping block. That night, over warmed spaghetti and meatballs, I logged in remotely. Nothing earns respect like stepping up to a challenge. Easier said than done, of course. At midnight, I leaned back in my chair, running my hand through my hair, and glanced at Whiskers, who had taken up residence on the windowsill. She watched me with mild interest, or annoyance, her tail flicking lazily. "Wish you could help, gal," I muttered. "You do fancy yourself there as the queen of the operation." But this was my mess to clean up. The footage was tedious to review, hours capturing the same monotonous routines, but I wasn't one to shy away from hard work. Methodically, I scanned each frame, my focus unyielding. It was during the third night's footage I again noticed something odd. A shadowy figure, barely distinguishable, near the security cameras. My heart quickened. This was the lead I needed. I replayed the segment several times, collecting all of the details, my analytical mind piecing together the puzzle. "Well, I'll be," I exclaimed to Whiskers. The figure was tampering with the camera, a deliberate attempt to hide something. I stepped back to see some kind of big picture. The timestamp on the footage aligned with Emma's late shifts. I shook my head, doubt gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. Emma? Didn't fit, yet the evidence nudged me towards suspicion. The next day, I approached Emma with a mix of apprehension and professionalism. She greeted me with her usual charismatic smile, her confidence unwavering. "Jake, any updates on the missing stock?" "I've found something," I said, choosing my words carefully. "The surveillance tapes show someone tampering with the cameras during your shifts." Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of surprise. You think I'm involved?" I hesitated. "I'm not accusing you, but we need to figure this out. Can you help me review the delivery schedules, see if there's any pattern?" Emma nodded, a mixture of determination and defensiveness in her eyes. "Of course. Let's clear this up." We spent hours poring over the data, Emma's years of experience in logistics proving invaluable. She pointed out anomalies in the delivery records, discrepancies that aligned with the footage tampering. We were making progress, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of tension between us, a silent acknowledgement of the suspicions and stakes involved. Meanwhile, Lulabelle was a constant, relaxing presence, her warm jokes a balm for my frazzled nerves. During breaks, she'd join me for coffee, providing much-needed reprieves. "You look exhausted," she observed, her gaze steady and reassuring. "Yeah, this investigation has taken its toll," I admitted, grateful for her support. "You'll figure it out," she offered with quiet confidence. "I believe in you." Emma's proximity was a tense professional necessity, while Sarah's understanding felt like a lifeline. Her words lingered, a reminder of the trust I valued so deeply, but as the investigation progressed, the alarm bells in my head grew louder. Returning to the footage, I'd noticed something I'd missed before. The tampering coincided not only with Emma's access, but also with shifts Doug had covered on short notice. Memories flickered. I was conflicted. Doug and I had started at the warehouse on the same day and had known each other in college. Back then, we were close, sharing goals and aspirations over lunch breaks with wacky side business ideas. But things changed when I was promoted, and he got cool with occasional snide remarks, which was not like him. Resentment simmered beneath the surface, our friendship eroding like sand through fingers. The suspicion settled in my gut like a stone. Could Doug be involved? His recent behavior had been erratic, to be frank, and with Lulabelle's arrival, his attention had shifted, complicating matters further. While I aimed, as always, to stay professional, he caught on that I liked her too. She was a wild card, her presence unsettling the balance we once had. As I pieced together clues, a plan formed. I couldn't confront Emma or Doug without definitive proof. Instead, I needed to gather more evidence, involve law enforcement discreetly. The truth was within reach, but I had to be meticulous, strategic, smart. It was my responsibility to restore order, both in the warehouse and in this tangled web of relationships. With renewed focus, I prepared for the next steps, knowing that the resolution of this mystery would require not just logic and leadership, but also a delicate handling of the personal connections that mattered most. Chapter 3. Confrontation and Closure. The warehouse loomed large and silent in the dim glow of the security lights. My footsteps echoed through the chilled corridors as I made my way to the meeting spot. I had arranged to meet Emma in the small break room, a neutral setting away from the prying eyes of our colleagues. My mind buzzed with the details of the plan, each step meticulously considered, each possibility weighed. As a man who thrived on order and justice, I knew the confrontation had to be handled with care. Opening the door, I found Emma already there, her foot tapping nervously against the tiled floor. Her eyes met mine with a mixture of apprehension and relief. I had always respected Emma for her efficiency and shared interests. But now, seeing her like this, I felt a pang of sympathy. "Emma," I began, keeping my tone firm yet understanding. "I reviewed the footage. It doesn't look good. Protocol said to keep the door open at all times with an employee, but I wanted to give her some respect of privacy, so I closed it halfway." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I wanted to tell you, Jake, but I couldn't. They threatened my family." Her words hung in the air, and in that moment the pieces all clicked into place. Emma wasn't the mastermind or even willing. She was a pawn. The clarity of her predicament struck a chord within me. My instinct to protect kicked in. "I believe you," I said, stepping closer. "But we need to set things right. I have a plan." In the days that followed, we quietly coordinated with a police investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Jackie. She had already spoken with Emma and pieced together the external threats, the city's nastiest gang. Together, we orchestrated a sting operation to catch the real thief, a former employee, Marcus, with a grudge and a knack for manipulation. I knew him well because I had moved to fire him on day one after my promotion. To be frank, it was all quite exciting, though I stayed cool as a cucumber. I commended Emma for staying cool too. Even Lulabelle took a while to catch on. The night of the operation, I stood alongside Emma and Jackie, the warehouse now transformed into a hub of strategic positioning. My heart drummed a steady rhythm of anticipation. This was it, the culmination of effort and determination. I watched as the suspect, indeed Marcus, unaware of the trap, made his move. The police swooped in, and the scene unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Marcus's surprise quickly turned to resignation, with an evil eye my way as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Order restored, justice served. I felt the weight of responsibility ease from my shoulders. "Good job, Doug," I called out honestly, with half the warehouse in earshot. Maybe it was time to give Doug a tough job to prove himself worthy of a little promotion. Later, as the dust settled, I found myself reflecting on the tangled web of personal and professional ties. Emma had been in a difficult situation, and while her actions were misguided, I understood her desperation. We parted on amicable terms, a mutual respect lingering between us. I let her know I would recommend her for whatever job she aimed next for, and I made sure to let everyone think she was moving on to bigger things. Lulabelle and I huddled over coffee on a break, as always. She had been my unwavering anchor through it all. Her quiet support had been a balm to my stress, her presence a constant when everything else seemed uncertain. She didn't question, she simply supported. As I handed her her usual sugar packet under the room's fluorescent glare, I realized where my heart truly lay. Lulabelle, I said, finding warmth in her gaze. Thank you for being my rock through this. She smiled, a hint of relief softening her features. Always, Jake. You can count on me. Our bond had grown stronger through the trials, forged in trust and shared passions. With the mystery resolved, a new chapter beckoned, one where we could explore what lay beyond the boundaries of work and into something more. As if reading my mind, she added, maybe we can grab a coffee at a nice place sometime. I marveled at how she did that. The warehouse, my workplace, briefly a stage for uncertainty and intrigue, now stood as a testament to resilience and integrity. I would continue to manage it with the same commitment and order, but with a newfound understanding of the complexities of human nature. With Lulabelle by my side and Whiskers purring contently at home, I closed the door on one adventure, ready to embrace the next.
I think it's really worthwhile to go through it, and a lot of people have this maybe belief that they can't write stories or something like that. And I'm not gonna say your story is gonna be amazing when you write it, but they say no, not write what you know, but know what you write. And I really believe that, like with the writing process I would take people through where they write from their writing partner's point of view, everybody wrote like really cool stories, including people who had never written fiction
Mm,
before. So there's just an element of hand-holding that can make it happen. And these don't have to be huge stories. They're like 1, 2 pages, whatever, usually 2 pages. Most of the stories in here are like 2.5 pages long. And there's a lot that happens there. And it really makes you think in just the process of writing the story, like, okay, I'm going to pick this type, and I know 3 people of this type. And, if you don't know what ideas are out there, I would tell people like, boot up the AI and say, trying to write a story about this particular type. Can you give me some ideas?
mhm,
If somebody needs help with that, and then just start. And
mhm.
that's, dark and stormy night. Something happened. Um,
Yeah.
what I would suggest anybody do is like outline your story beforehand. Like that to
Mm,
me is just a death knell of like motivation and creativity. Allow yourself to
interesting.
discover the story. Yeah. And the other
I
thing
think they
is,
call that a pantser, right? As a writing style. Pantser.
oh,
Like you
is
just
it?
go by the seat of
Yeah.
your pants. Like, I'm just gonna just go
Yes.
do what my character would do in the moment, and I'm gonna write about that
Exactly.
instead of having it
Yeah,
all
yeah.
planned
And
out.
and some people have a big like feeling or compunction that they need the character to do what is the right thing to do.
Mm,
And I'm like, no, most people in life don't do the right thing, especially if it's a growth opportunity. Like,
mm,
people learn from failure. So your character is going to fail in the story. So if you don't believe in, I don't know, doing drugs, for example, it's okay that your character does that. And then
uh,
like learn something from doing it and maybe then doesn't do it afterward. Like, but
mhm.
this is not like a political treatise. Um, the warning for you TIFE types, fiction is not about philosophy. Okay, you're not writing a philosophy tract. You're writing the human experience.
With a bunch of
Um,
footnotes and explanations
that's
underneath it.
right. You can add those footnotes and explanations afterwards, but the characters are not stand-ins for different philosophical points of view. I'm just saying, like, the generally speaking, that's a way to discover it. And I think that's okay if you want to write the character of that type. Let's say you're writing a story that's an INFJ and an INTP. They will have a philosophical conversation, and that will totally make sense. But if you're
Mm,
trying to write an INFP story, that's not a way to write an INFP story. And
yeah.
that's the INFP story needs to be about an actual human being, fictional but actual.
Mm,
And the existential challenges of doing that. Does the character need full self-awareness and all of that? No. I mean, many times we're unaware of the things that we're doing. Um,
mhm,
the Jung really emphasized that when people are in this growth space, it's a numinous space. So something mysterious and weird is happening that's unpleasant. And
Mhm.
and it's either many small unpleasant things or it's multiple things.
Yeah.
That sort of many or multiple or like one, and
Mm.
that's okay too. Like and of course, I can't help but say, like, buy the book and read the examples, and then that will
Yes.
give you some inspiration. And there's an analysis section with each. And it's so funny because, I have like 9 really great reviews of the book, and then one person who's like, I'm very educated and I consider myself a creative person. I didn't understand the stories at all, and I know type. I don't know. There's no accounting for everybody. But I
No.
think the stories are like really understandable, frankly. I don't know what to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I also know that you can't please everybody. Everybody's
Right.
also like they not just having different interests, but different metaphors for engaging with the world. And I
Uh-huh.
think story as it is, like there's gonna be hit and miss for a lot of them, but also whether it's good advice or bad advice, like hopefully the character learns from whatever issues
Yeah.
come about. But they'll have that as a reference and different little mini advisors within their mind that are saying like this is a good way to go, or maybe
Mhm.
you could go try this thing, or this is
Uh-huh.
good for your personality type possibly.
And then that comes back to what you said at the beginning about the stories as examples for our own lives. That although we're
Mhm.
talking about writing and short stories, that really, we are the authors of our own lives to some extent. Not everything. Other things, those are the starting parameters we end up with, and the other people in our lives sort of limit what we can do. But nonetheless, having that more proactive mindset and like what does it look like to go through development for our type towards our
Mhm.
opposite? Like what can that look like? And I believe it can look very different from one person to the next, even at the same type, but to at least see some examples and
Yeah.
know like, oh yeah, this isn't weird for my child or my spouse or me or whatever it is, coworker, like
Mhm.
these everybody has these weird experiences in
Yeah,
some way. Yeah, well, it's weird for them or is a
definitely.
failure experience or very painful or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's all failing forward if you learn from it.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. All right, well, I will put the links down below and everybody can pick up your book, dun, 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 Teaching Tales, and
Mm,
get a different perspective on personality type and self development that hopefully resonates with a lot more people and gets more people
yeah.
into growing as people and helping out the world and all that good
Yes.
stuff. So, thank you very much again for joining Dr. Dario Nardi.
Thank you for having me. A lot of fun. Thank you.
いや、ありがとうございました。
はい、ありがとう。じゃあね。